Good afternoon, everyone. We will get started at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the lobby for anyone else who might join. Okay, well, it just told me people are waiting in the lobby, but I thought I just turned the lobby off. So maybe I didn't actually click save. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Leslie Miller talking to us about provisional feeding. As a reminder, if you have questions, you can use the chat function to enter those, and we will answer them at the end of today's webinar. If there's anything major that needs to be addressed that you put in there during the training, I will bring that to Leslie's attention. But for the most part, everything will be answered at the end of the training. Everyone is on mute, so if you did want to say something to ask a question, you would have to raise your hand and be unmuted. So the best way to do that is really just to use the chat function. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Leslie.
Helps to unmute. Thank you, Randa. Hello, everyone. As Randa said, I am Leslie Miller, and I am the first regional consultant up in the northeast part of the state. I appreciate everyone taking time to call in today and to learn about provisional feeding. So let's get started. All right. This is the Department of Education's strategic plan, and we in school nutrition fall into student readiness. All of us on this call know that you cannot teach a hungry child, and so that is where we fall, and that is why what all of y'all do and your staff is so very important to make sure the students of Tennessee are fed nutritious meals every single day. The mission statement for our program for school nutrition is to develop extraordinary school nutrition professionals and provide strategies to increase consumption of healthy school meals. The objectives for today's training are to provide an overview of provisional feeding models. And our agenda, we are going to talk in depth about the community eligibility provision, better known as CEP, and provision 2. We are going to touch on provision 1 and provision 3 at the end of the presentation when we talk about the comparison between all of the provisional feeding models. Okay, so let's start with CEP, which is the community eligibility provision. So this is a provision that the majority of districts in our state, if they operate a provisional feeding model, this is what most people operate. And it's an option for schools to offer meals at no cost to all enrolled students without collecting household applications. This provisional model came about by the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010, and it is codified in 7 CFR 245.9F. And so it is a reimbursement alternative for eligible LEAs and schools participating in the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. This third bullet says that CEP eliminates the need for schools to collect household income applications. It not only eliminates it, but it prohibits it. And so if you are operating any schools, operating CEP in any schools, you cannot collect free and reduced applications at those schools. And of course, it reduces the administrative burden for schools and families because you're not having to collect those applications. And then also, if you operate CEP, you do not have to, at the schools that you operate CEP at, those schools are not subject to verification. So that is another way that it reduces the administrative burden. In order to operate CEP, there are a few requirements. And so school food authorities, which we also call districts, but SFAs, you must participate in the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. You must serve free meals to all students in participating schools. You must maintain a count of reimbursable meals served to students daily. You must cover the cost of providing those meals at no cost to all students that exceed the federal reimbursement. So what that means is if you are operating CEP and you are losing money, then you've got to cover that cost. And then you must comply with all program requirements. So this year we had some fun things, right? We had a mid-year election for CEP, and that was because on September 26th of 2023, SNS released a policy memo because they reduced the minimum ISP. So prior to this policy memo, you had to have an ISP of 40% to operate CEP, and we're going to get into exactly what the ISP, which stands for Identified Student Percentage, we're going to talk about what that is. But they lowered it from 40% to 25%. they lowered the ISP. However, they did not raise the multiplier, which is 1.6. And so lowering the ISP to 25% may or may not be beneficial for everyone. Prior to lowering the ISP, we would typically say as a state agency, the guidance that we gave was to, to be financially viable, you would want an ISP around 50. There are districts that made it work with a much lower ISP of around 40. And now there are districts that are giving it a go with lower than 40, since now the minimum is at 25%. And so, the most important thing is we at the state agency can't say you have to be at 50%. That is a local decision that is made between all parties within your district that are making that decision. And of course, as I said previously, if you're losing money, then that money has to come from somewhere. You can't operate your program in the red. And so that money has to be made up somewhere if you happen to be losing money with that lowered ISP. So because USDA lowered the ISP to 25%, we as the state of Tennessee requested a waiver from the USDA for districts to be able to opt in January to operate CEP. Along with that mid-year CEP waiver, we in Tennessee also started DC matching this year, where we now have Medicaid free and Medicaid reduced students. And so because of that, many of y'all saw a dramatic increase in your number of directly certified students. Only the Medicaid free can go towards your ISP, which again, we'll talk about in some future slides. However, because of the USDA lowering the ISP to 25% and Tennessee opting into mid-year CEP, and Tennessee now having Medicaid free students, then it created this perfect, some of us might call it a storm, but a perfect opportunity for many of y'all to opt in to mid-year CEP this year. And so I know here in my region, in the first region, I had many districts that opted in that had not done CEP previously. And I know that was that way in many of the regions across the state. And so we are happy that there are lots more students that are receiving free meals because of being able to lower the ISP in conjunction with the Medicaid free students. So if you want to read that memo, it is SY23-24. Okay, so what is an identified student percentage, which we call the ISP? It's the proportion of students who are directly certified for free school meals through means other than a school meal application. So prior to having Medicaid free and Medicaid reduced students, anybody that was directly certified was a free student. Anybody that was certified for free meals without an application, so they came off of a list, those were your directly certified students. Now we have Medicaid reduced students, so they're directly certified, however, they're not receiving free meals. When we talk about an ISP, only those students that are certified for free meals off of a list can go towards your ISP. Because of the mid-year, those of y'all that opted into that date was October 31st. However, typically the date is April 1st. And so you get your numbers as of April 1st. And so if you're thinking about operating CEP for the 24-25 school year, then you are going to look at your data as of April 1st of 2024, which will be here before we know it. Here are a list of some of those students that can go toward your ISP. So those are your SNAP students, your TANF students, your Medicaid free, or your FDPIR, which I've never seen any of those students in the state of Tennessee. Also, Head Start students can be part of the ISP, but that looks different in different districts. Some districts, the Head Start students are actually enrolled, like in your pre-K programs, and those students can be counted. However, if the students aren't enrolled, then they probably can't be counted. So that the Head Start can be directly certified students, but they aren't always directly certified students. And then also homeless, migrant, runaway and foster children, or yes, foster students are also directly certified and go towards your ISP. When we talk about, so there's two parts of the ISP, there's the directly certified students, and then there is the enrollment/attendance. And so enrolled students, the definition are students who are enrolled in and attending schools and have access to at least one meal, either breakfast or lunch every day. And so here in Tennessee, we use attendance. And so, for example, those of y'all that elected into mid-year, as of October 31st data, you use the attendance for October 31st and not the enrollment. And that gives you a better ISP, right? Because enrollment is always going to be higher than your actual attendance for that day. And so if you're going to think about doing CEP for 24-25, then you're going to use the attendance from April the 1st. And I haven't looked, I don't know, is April the 1st on a weekend? I probably should have looked at that prior. Let me look real quick and see. Oh, nope, good. April 1st is on a Monday this year. Glory, hallelujah. Okay. Okay, so how do we calculate that ISP? It's actually pretty simple, even for me, who is not great at math, but you take your number of identified students, and though it is divided by your number of enrolled students, and then you multiply that by 100 to get your ISP. So that is the first step. Then you take that ISP and you use the multiplier, which is 1.6, to get the percentage of meals reimbursed at the free rate. You round the percentage to 2 decimal places, and then you multiply the percentage of meals reimbursed at the free rate by the total number of reimbursable meals in the claiming period to get the number of meals reimbursed at the free rate, and then the remaining meals reimbursed at the paid rate. So when you're operating CEP, you are getting reimbursed for free meals and for paid meals. There are no reduced meals reimbursed. We're going to look at some actual math. So here's an example. So our attendance is 521, and our identified students are 300. So we divide 300 by 521, and that gives us an ISP, and then we multiply that by 100, and that gives us an ISP of 57.58%. So what that then means is you take that 57.58, multiply it by the multiplier of 1.6 to get 92.13. So 92.13% of the total meals at that site would be claimed at the free rate, and then the remaining 7.87% would be claimed at the paid rate. Now, there's a magic ISP, which is 62.5%. So if your ISP prior to the multiplier is 62.5%, then all of your meals would be reimbursed at the free rate. Because when you take 62.5 and you multiply it by 1.6, that gives you 100. And so again, that magic number to get all of your meals reimbursed at the free rate is 62.5 or above that. TMAC does all of this math for you when you do your claims, but when the free or paid meal calculations result in partial meals, then we use standard rounding procedures. So the example is there are 800 reimbursable meals. The free claiming percentage is 86.15%. And so that would equal 689.2 meals reimbursed at the free rate, but we can't reimburse partial meals. And so with standard rounding, we would round that down to 689 meals. And then the difference of that from the 800 is 111. So 689 meals would be reimbursed at the free rate, and 111 would be reimbursed at the paid rate. Again, TMAC does that calculation for you, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it. However, I know many of y'all keep your own spreadsheets and calculations for your own books, and so that is why we talk about the rounding, so that y'all know that it's standard rounding if you are setting up your own spreadsheets and books for that. Now, CEP is a 4-year cycle. Now, there's a little caveat to that. So those of y'all that opted in in January for mid-year CEP, you in essence have lost half of the year, right? Because it's the mid-year. And so your cycle is really 3.5 years. But typically it is a 4-year cycle. And also another caveat to go along with that is when, if you did mid-year CEP and you were already a district that was operating CEP, a partial CEP, like you had some schools that were operating it and other schools that were not, then if you took your new schools and put them in with your current CEP schools, then you must reapply for CEP this April, or as of April. Use numbers as of April. The deadline to let us know about CEP is June 30th. So if you were somebody that did mid-year CEP and you already were operating CEP and you added schools to an existing CEP group or school, then you must reelect for next school year for 24-25. If you're brand new to CEP in January, you don't have to reapply for next year. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. And if you were a mixed district and you didn't mess with or add to your existing group, you also do not have to reapply for next school year. I know that many of you probably will, but it is not a requirement. So with that 4-year cycle, if your ISP increases during that time, you can start your cycle over. If it decreases, you don't have to worry about that because you are locked in for that 4-year cycle, or as I said, 3.5 for mid-year this year. If you're gonna reapply, if your ISP increases, then of course you would have to upload your documentation to support your new ISP. And you can always see what your current ISP is in TMAC under your SFA application and then the CEP schedule. USDA actually has a very robust CEP page with a lot of great resources on it. And this is the link to that page. And there is a community eligibility provision planning and implementation guidance on that resource page. Again, there's a plethora of resources on there. So I encourage anyone to have a look at that. There's also a CEP estimator tool that many of you have used, and there is a link here to that tool. Also wanted to say, those of y'all that are new to CEP, if like brand new to CEP in January, when you go to do your claim in TMAC for January, you might have in the past only done site-based claiming when it was required, which was October and March. However, when you operate CEP, you must claim every month by site. So when you go to do your January claim, if you're new to CEP, you are going to notice that you are going to have to put those numbers in by site for each one of your sites. Even if you are a district that did, maybe you have 10 schools and you opted into 5 schools to operate CEP, it doesn't matter. All 10 of your schools, you have to claim by site every month when you're operating CEP. So I just wanted to let y'all know that so you're aware of it. And of course, any questions? Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I put the CEP resource link in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then I was just going to say, of course, your regional consultant is always an excellent source of information about CEP. If you have specific questions, of course, put them in the chat and we will answer those. But if you are also wanting just some one-on-one information about CEP, reach out to your regional consultant. Okay, now we are going to talk about Provision 2. So Provision 2, there are a decent amount of y'all in the state of Tennessee that operate Provision 2. And so in some ways it is similar to CEP, but then in other ways it is not. So one of the ways that it is similar is it's a 4-year period, and during those 4 years, you serve meals to all students at no charge. With Provision 2, we talk about a base year, which we do not with CEP, but for Provision 2, there's a base year, and it is included as part of the 4 years. So with Provision 2, in that base year, which is the first year, like you decide, yes, I'm going to do Provision 2 for the 24-25 school year. And so for the 24-20, or starting in the 24-25 school year, so in that first year, your base year, that is when you make eligibility determinations. And so you are providing meals at no cost to all the students during that base year. However, you are still having to claim those meals by free, reduced, and paid. However, the meals are happening based on the eligibility that you made in that first year. So anybody that operates universal breakfast, it's similar to that. The base year of Provision 2 is very similar to how you operate universal breakfast, which is an option where you can feed breakfast to all students at no cost. However, you are claiming them by their actual eligibility. So that is the base year. You still collect free and reduced applications. Of course, you're directly certified students. You're still doing all of that during that base year. After the base year, you're no longer collecting free and reduced applications. You're still finding directly certified students, but you're no longer collecting free and reduced applications. So during the next 3 years of Provision 2, meals are not counted by eligibility. So when the kids are going through the line, it's not that, Tommy is a free kid and Sally is a reduced kid and Becky is a paid kid. Everybody is just getting meals, but they don't have an eligibility tied to a student. But the reimbursement is determined by applying the claiming percentages established during that first base year to the total meal counts for the claiming month. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. With Provision 2, at the end of each 4-year period, the state agency may approve 4-year extensions if the income level of the school's population remains stable compared to the base year. Just like with CEP, if you happen to operate Provision 2 and you're losing money, then you have to, make up the difference with that. And then with Provision 2, the money for that has to be from sources other than federal funds. So the claiming percentages for Provision 2, it's a ratio, which we're going to do some math here in a minute, of each meal category, free, reduced, and paid, to the total reimbursable lunches or breakfast served. And I didn't say it, but with Provision 2, you can choose. You could operate Provision 2 for breakfast and not for lunch, or vice versa. You don't have to do it for breakfast and lunch. You can choose if you so wanted to do it that way. So separate claiming percentages are established for each type of meal service, and each school must establish its own claiming percentages. So you can't do a district-wide claiming percentage. It is done by site, by school. For Provision 2, the reimbursement is determined by the participation percentages established in the base year. Annual claiming uses total meal counts from the base year to calculate one set of claiming percentages based on participation, and then those percentages are consistently used each month for the remaining 3 years. Monthly claiming establishes a set of claiming percentages based on participation that will be used in each subsequent month for the remaining 3 years. So for example, the claim rate from August of year 1 will be the claim rate for August in years 2 through 4. You can also do annual claiming percentages, which we will also talk about. So here's some calculations. This is how we figure it out. So for the free meals, you've got your free meals that were served. You have to know your total meals for the month, and then you multiply that by 100 to get your free claiming percentage. Same thing with reduced. Your total meals, you need to know how many reduced meals were served, multiply that by 100, and the same for paid. So let's look at an example. So this is a monthly claiming example. So for each Provision 2 school, The free, reduced, and paid meal counts at the point of service for April 22 of the base year were, there were 22,500 free meals claimed, and I forgot to update that to April 22, and I apologize. So in April of 22, there were 22,500 free meals claimed. There were 5,000 reduced meals claimed, and there were 2,500 paid meals claimed. So the total meals for the month of April were 30,000 in the base year. So in our previous slide, we know that there were 22,500 free meals. So there are 30,000 total meals, 22,500 free meals. We do that math, multiply it by 100, and that gives us a percentage of 75. So 75% of the total student meals in April were claimed at the free rate. So that then becomes your monthly rate for April for your next 3 years. So this is your base year, April. We established this free claiming percentage, and then we use that 75% of free meals and apply that to your claim for the next 3 years in April. That is your April claiming percentage. And then we do the same thing for reduced. 30,000 was the total amount of meals. And so we had 5,000 reduced meals. So we divide 5,000 by 30,000 and we get 0.167. We multiply that by 100 to get 16.7%. So 16.7% of total student meals were claimed at the reduced rate. And that then becomes our April reduced claiming percentage for the next 3 years. And then the same thing for paid. 2,500 paid meals divided by total meals of 30,000 gives us 0.083, multiply that by 100, then gives us 8.3%. And so that is the paid claiming percentage for April for the next 3 years. So then we've got our claiming percentage established for April. We used April of 22. And so now we have fast forwarded to April of 2023, which is not our base year. This is our second year of Provision 2. And so our total meals that were served were 32,125 reimbursable meals served for April 2023. So then we're going to take those claiming percentages and apply those to 32,125. So we know from our math, 75% was our free claiming percentage. And so we take 32,125, multiply that by 75% to get 24,093.75 meals. Again, we can't claim a partial meal and we use standard rounding. And so we're going to round that up to 24,094 free meals for April 2023. And then for our reduced, our percentage that we got from April 2022 was 16.7. So when we do that math and apply that for April of 2023, then we are going to, you would be reimbursed for 5,365 reduced meals for April of 2023. And then for paid, our percentage that was set for April of 2022 for paid was 8.3%. And so we do the math, we get 2,666.375 paid meals. So we're going to round that down using standard rounding to get 2,666 meals that would be reimbursed at the paid rate for April of 2023. Again, TMAC does all of this math for you. You do not have to do this every month, just like with CEP, which I don't believe I said. But when you're operating CEP or Provision 2 in your second, third, and fourth years, for your claim, you're just putting one number. You're just putting, in this example, you would just put 32,125 meals were served, and then TMAC does that, the math for you. And so those were claiming percentages, and you would repeat that procedure for each month of the non-base year. And so you would set, if you're going to do monthly claiming for Provision 2, you would have a different claiming percentage for free, reduced, and paid for every single month that you serve meals. And of course, those percentages would vary from month to month. And as I said, it's automatically done in TMAC. Now, you can also do annual claiming for Provision 2. And so in this example, in our base year, for the whole entire year, 250,000 meals were served. And so to get our free claiming percentage for the base year, we have our total meal count of 250,000. Of those 250,000, 175,000 of those were free meals. And so we do the math, we divide 175,000. I apologize again that those numbers do not match, but it gives us a free claiming percentage of 70.10% would be our annual claiming percentage of free meals. For reduced, we have 250,000 meals again. Of those 250,000, 45,500 were reduced. We do the math, and that gives us a percentage of 18.2%. And then for paid, we have a total of 250,000. Of those 250,000, 29,250 were paid. And so that gives us a percentage of 11.7%. And so when you do an annual claiming, you take each of those percentage, and it's the same percentage all year long that is applied to however many meals you serve in year 2, 3, and 4. There's also a guidance manual for Provision 2, which has a lot of good information in it. If you were thinking about operating Provision 2, you need to contact your regional consultant at the beginning of your Provisional 2 base year. And so if you think Provision 2 is something you might want to do for next school year for 24-25, you need to get with your consultant, prior to August for sure. Like you would want to probably start having that conversation March or April and, talking about what that is going to look like. Okay. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water real quick. Okay, so now let's compare our provisional feeding models. As I said at the beginning, we didn't go into depth about Provision 1 or Provision 3 because honestly, there is not a lot of information about Provision 1 or Provision 3 provided to us. And so what you see here on the screen is literally all we know about Provision 1 or Provision 3. And nobody in the state of Tennessee operates Provision 1 or Provision 3. I'm not saying y'all couldn't, just right now, nobody does. And so if we are comparing our 4 provisional options, of course, CEP is a 4-year cycle, and also Provision 2 is for 4 years. Provision 3, you also serve all meals at no charge for a 4-year period. CEP, your eligibility, other than what we did mid-year this year, but your eligibility is based on April 1st, and it is based on directly certified students. So those students that are eating at no cost based on something other than an application. Meals are free for all students for CEP, and your claim for reimbursement is based on claiming percentages for free and paid rates. There are no reduced with CEP. Provision 1, it's free eligibility that is certified for a 2-year period. In order to operate Provision 1, at least 80% of enrolled students must be eligible for free or reduced price meals. So your free and reduced rate must be at least 80% to be eligible for Provision 1. Provision 1 reduces the annual notification and eligibility certification. Meal counts by eligibility as the basis for reimbursement, and all other households must be provided with a meal application with Provision 1. For Provision 2, as we said, you serve all meals at no charge for a 4-year period. Your eligibility determinations when you're setting your claiming percentages are made in your first year, which we also call the base year. In that first year, meals are counted by type. And then going forward, no new eligibility determinations are made for 3 years. And your claim for reimbursement is based on the claiming percentages that you established in the base year, either monthly or annually. And then for Provision 3, you serve all meals at no charge for a 4-year period. Schools receive the same level of reimbursement in commodities as in the base year, which is your first year. and it's based on the last year of eligibility determinations and meal counts by type from your base year. Oh goodness, sorry about that. Here's the survey link. There's the QR code, and then I believe Randa is also going to throw that actual link in the chat. And then I am going to go to the chat and see if we have any questions. Where is okay. Sorry, y'all. Trying to get. Right now, I've lost my little box that's got where I could get to the chat. What are we thinking?
Well, there aren't any questions, so it's okay.
Oh, there's no questions?
And I
okay,
did.
Cool.
No, and I did put the link in the chat. So
okay.
you can give it a couple seconds to see if any come through,
yeah.
but there haven't been any so far.
Okay. All right. If you've got any questions, throw them there in the chat box. Again, here's the survey, the QR code, and the link is in the chat. And then my contact information is on the screen. If you would like to contact me, I'll be happy to answer any questions. But again, reach out to your regional consultant with any questions that you may have as well. And we welcome all of the new CEP districts that elected in January. It was a whirlwind for everyone, and especially Snow threw a little bit of a monkey wrench into there, getting things in there. But I believe everybody got it done. And so, like I said at the beginning, we're very thankful that so many more children are now receiving meals at no cost. And we hope y'all are seeing a big increase in participation, those of you that elected in mid-year, and that things are going well. Any questions in that
3
box,
people
Miranda?
told you great job, and there were no questions. So I think we are good to call the presentation. Thank you everyone for being here and participating. There will be a follow-up email with the PowerPoint and the training link as well. That'll be sent out hopefully by the end of the week, if not early next week. So thank you all for joining, and we'll chat soon.
Yes, thank y'all so much.
Bye, everyone.